The Crusades in a nutshell. After the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, the Seljuk Turks were getting dangerously close to Byzantium. Desperate, Alexius Comnenus, the Byzantine emperor, called for help. Also, Christians were being mistreated at Jerusalem, an important place for the religion. Because of all that, during 1095 at Clermont, France, Pope Urban II launched the First Crusade. Days of the Vault! The First Crusade had three main goals: to win back Jerusalem from the Muslims, to win back land for the Byzantines, and to get rid of the constantly warring nobles. All of the nobles went home to prepare for the long journey. Peter the Hermit, a famous preacher, gathered an army of untrained commoners with his strategist, Walter the Penniless, and set off for Byzantium without the main group. On the way there, they plundered many villages and slaughtered many people. When they finally got there, Alexius told them to go home. As expected, Kilij Arslan decimated them. This was known as the People's Crusade. The First Crusade officially started on 1096, August 15th, when all of the real Crusaders had arrived. First captured the Seljuk capital of Nicaea, where Peter the Hermit had been defeated. The Crusaders then marched onto Dorylaeum, freeing up their path through Anatolia. After that, the Crusaders split in two, one group heading for Edessa and one for Antioch. The siege of Antioch took a whole year. Bohemond of Taranto, an important Crusader leader, took control of the city while the rest marched on to Jerusalem. Jerusalem had just been captured by the Fatimid Egyptians from the Seljuks. With the help of a few siege machines, Godfrey of Bouillon and Raymond IV captured Jerusalem after a long siege. The Crusaders then marched onto Ascalon, a Fatimid fortress, to solidify their position in Jerusalem. Thus, the First Crusade had ended. In 1142, Zengi, a Seljuk emir, took Edessa. Pope Eugenius II and an abbot named Bernard of Clairvaux then launched the Second Crusade. Moved by Bernard's preaching, King Louis VII of France and King Conrad III took to the cross. Conrad arrived at Byzantium before Louis and was decimated at the Second Battle of Dorylaeum. Battered, Conrad limped back to Nicaea. When Louis finally arrived, Conrad and he set off for Edessa. However, throughout the march across Anatolia, they were constantly being harassed by the Seljuks, who had the homeland advantage. They were forced to take refuge at Antioch. After that, they decided to try their hand on Damascus, an enemy of Zengi. They were just about to win when all in all, the Second Crusade was In 1174, Nur al-Din had died, and his subordinate, Vizier of Cairo, seized power in Damascus. He also captured a bunch of other cities from Zengi's other heirs. For each city that he conquered, he left a family member to govern it. Thus, Saladin had created the Ayyubid dynasty by uniting the Fatimids and some of the Seljuks. With most of the Muslims united, he retreated to Cairo to build up an army and launched a huge expedition against the Crusaders. After taking back most of the Crusader states, Saladin finally advanced to Jerusalem. At the Battle of Hattin, Saladin defeated the Crusaders and managed to capture Jerusalem. When the Pope heard about this, he dropped dead on the spot. The new Pope, Gregory VIII, launched the Third Crusade to defeat the new Ayyubid threat. Richard Lionheart, Philip II of France, and Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire took to the cross. Philip and Richard went to Acre by boat, while Fred walked. On his march through Anatolia, Fred was quite successful. Unfortunately, he drowned when crossing a stream. Because of that, most of the Germans went home, while the rest marched toward Acre. Philip arrived at Acre a while later, while Richard set up a base in Cyprus. The Crusaders finally took Acre after Richard arrived to help. After Acre, Richard marched south to Jaffa, keeping his army next to the sea. Throughout the march, Saladin's men harassed Richard with hit-and-runs, but to no avail, since Richard's formation was too stable. Saladin then arranged an all-out ambush on Richard near Arsuf. Richard had expected this, and defeated Saladin's army. Next, Richard took Jaffa, then Ascalon. Saladin countered by taking back Jaffa. Richard took Jaffa back again. By now, the Crusaders were ready to attack Jerusalem. Richard decided not to, because it was too far inland, where Saladin could easily surround and decimate him. He signed the Treaty with Saladin, giving pilgrims free passage to Jerusalem. Thus, the Third Crusade had ended. In 1198, Pope Innocent III wanted to take back Jerusalem once and for all. The leaders of this crusade knew the dangers of walking all the way through Europe and Anatolia, so they decided to sail there instead. So, the Venetians cut off all commercial activity and began making the ships. Unfortunately, after they had finished, the Crusaders still did not have enough to pay them back. Enrico Dandolo, the Doge of Venice, asked the Crusaders to capture the Christian city of Zara as compensation. After they did so, the Pope excommunicated them all. Just then, a Byzantine named Alexius III asked for help. He was the rightful emperor to the Byzantine Empire, and needed help toppling his enemy. So, the Crusaders traveled to Byzantium and besieged the largest city in Christendom. While Alexius was still paying them back, Mort-Sophilus suddenly came in and dethroned Alexius. Stuck in Byzantium with still no money, the Crusaders sacked the city in the Second Siege of Constantinople. All in all, the Fourth Crusade took back none of the Holy Land and was an epic. By this time, Saladin had died and his kingdom descended into a civil war between his heirs. Saladin's brother, Al-Adil, eventually rose up among them all. In the wake of the failure of his Fourth Crusade, Pope Innocent called for a fifth one, but crusading fever had died down, and it was only until after his death when people took to the cross. The Crusaders first arrived at Cyprus, then traveled to Acre, where they captured a few minor castles. Currently more focused on toppling the Ubids than securing Jerusalem, the Crusaders attacked Damietta, an island in the Nile Delta. Just then, Al-Adil died, and the Ubids descended once again into civil war. Al-Adil's somewhat in control son, Al-Kamil, offered Jerusalem in exchange for Damietta. The Crusaders began marching south to Mansura, another Ayyubid fortress. By now, the Muslims recognized the Crusaders' threat and united, defeating the Crusaders. Thus, the Fifth Crusade had ended. It was another... Pope Honorius III blamed the Crusaders' defeat on Frederick II and excommunicated him. This was not fair, since the crusade was sped up without his knowing. Even so, he decided to redeem himself by launching the Sixth Crusade. Like the others before him, Fred first sailed to Cyprus, then the Levant. Realizing that he was no match for the entire Ayyubid army, he struck Al-Kamil a deal. Al-Kamil, then trying to deal with some rebels, agreed. Thus, the Sixth Crusade had ended. Ironically, the only conflict the Crusaders had was with the people of Cyprus. After the Sixth Crusade, the Ayyubids were losing their power. On 1244, the rising Mamluk power retook Jerusalem and Damascus. Because of this, King Louis IX of France decided to go on a crusade on his own. Exactly like the Fifth Crusade, Louis went to Cyprus, then attacked Damietta. Louis then advanced to Cairo, but was attacked by flood. It was necessary to secure Mansura first. It took a long time to do this, and when they were done, they were very weak. As they were retreating to Damietta, the Mamluks ascended upon them and took Louis hostage. After a hefty ransom, Louis went to Acre with his army. Thus, the Seventh Crusade had ended. It was A few years later, Louis' mom had died, so Louis needed to go home to run France. Meanwhile, the Mongols had destroyed the Muslim Persians and were moving to Syria. They took Aleppo and Damascus. Folks, angered, pushed them back. Trying to restore the situation, Louis decided to launch the Eighth Crusade in 1270. His brother, Charles Anu, persuaded him to first attack Tunis to gain a secure base. During the siege, Louis died of dysentery. Charles, a less enthusiastic crusader, took charge of the army, made peace with the Bey of Tunisia, and went home. Thus the Eighth Crusade had ended. It was a... In 1268, Antioch had fallen to Baibars, a Mamluk sultan. They demolished it. Baibars also went on to conquer the last remaining Crusader states in the Levant. This sparked the Ninth Crusade, led by Edward I of England. Edward had just attended the Eighth Crusade with his brother Edmund and Louis. On 1271, he sailed from Tunis to Acre, together with Charles and Hugh, who had just arrived. Edward marched towards Tripoli, where he was able to stop a Mamluk siege. Baibars then launched a naval attack on Cyprus, to no avail. In the end, Edward helped King Hugh of Cyprus make a truce with Baibars, ending the Ninth Crusade.